This is an Oscar-winning movie.
If there ever has
This is
been
part
a bigger
one.
bootlegger than Remus, the fact remains a secret.
A lawyer.
Remus was to bootlegging what Rockefeller was to oil.
He was the Rockefeller of
imagination of his
bootleggers.
plan, in the insolent sweep of his ambition, and the power with which he swept upward toward his goal, Remus can bear comparison with the captains of industry.
He was that good.
St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
Oh, the story is amazing.
George Remus was one of the best-known criminal attorneys in the Midwest. A self-made man, he had arrived in America with his German immigrant parents at 5. Was forced to leave school at 15 to support his family. Became a pharmacist at 19.
That's
put
smart.
himself through law school at night, and then spent 20 years as a defense attorney in Chicago.
But here's the opening scene of the
In
movie.
his most celebrated case, he had tried but failed to win acquittal for a man who had murdered his wife on the then unusual grounds of temporary insanity.
And this is why it's the opening scene. I'll show you later.
Remus found himself defending bootleggers in a courtroom presided over by a federal judge named Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
Who became the first commissioner of
Remus
baseball.
was angered at the size of the judge's arbitrary fines, but also intrigued by the ease with which his clients peeled off $1,000 bills to pay them.
That's right.
I was impressed by the rapidity with which those men, without any brains at all, piled up fortunes in the liquor business.
And here's who would play him. Paul Giamatti would play this
The more I
guy.
studied the Volstead Act, the more I was convinced of its frailties. And so I decided to get
And that's
in on
Paul
the ground
Giamatti
floor.
right there.
Struck while the iron was hot.
He's smart. See a hole in the law, exploit
Practicing
it.
law had already made Remus rich. Like Roy Olmsted in Seattle, he would discover that breaking the law would make him far richer. And he would do it on a scale beyond anything Olmsted could have imagined.
You just
Remus
wait.
knew that millions of gallons of liquor, manufactured before Prohibition, were locked away in bonded distillery warehouses.
And that was legal.
If their owners could get government withdrawal permits, they could sell it legally, but only to drug companies and only if they promised to dispense it
So
for
let's open
purely
drug
medicinal
companies.
purposes. By buying up
Doctors.
distilleries and creating his own drug company, Remus could become both buyer and seller,
God bless
and
America.
then cook the books to lose shipments in between.
Yep.
He called his system
The Circle.
In June of 1920, after marrying Imogene Holmes, the secretary who had broken up his first marriage, Remus left Chicago and moved to Ohio to begin a new life. He picked Cincinnati because nearly 80% of America's bonded liquor was stored in distillery warehouses within a 300-mile radius.
Oh, this gets good. Wait till the second
Remus
part.
intended to buy up as many of them as he could.
And he built this enormous octopus of a bootlegging operation. And
Huge.
most cleverly, he started a drug company.
So there's your
Also
first half of the movie. First 30
And
minutes
then
of the
he would
movie.
send his trucks out. His own men would hijack
Then the
those
second
trucks.
half is the last hour and a half of the movie. It's crazy.
Remus set up his own bogus Kentucky drug company in Covington and bought up the Fleischmann and Edgewood distilleries in Cincinnati, as well as the Pogue
Fleischmann still
and
makes
Hill
yeast.
and Hill distilleries in Kentucky. He created his own trucking firm, the American Transportation Company, to carry whiskey to his distribution center, an isolated 50-acre Ohio farm hidden in a hollow, whose house, barns, and outhouses could hold tens of thousands of cases of whiskey. Because hired gunmen commanded every inch of the lone road that led down into it, his men liked to call the farm Death Valley. Customers ventured down and back up the road all day.
They came from all over the country and included the fashionable clubman, hotel keeper, the whiskey jobber, the petty bootlegger. They were as anxious to buy as I was to sell, and there was never a day that the demand was not 70% greater than the supply.
And listen to how much money he was making.
Sales were strictly cash. Some sometimes as much as $79,000 a day.
Good God.
Tax-free.
And in 1922
As
money.
wealth grew, so did his
That's like
self-confidence.
$700,000 a day in
And he began
cash.
to refer to himself in the third person.
Remus was in the whiskey business, and Remus was the
And he
biggest
starts to
man
go crazy.
in the business. Cincinnati was the American mecca for good liquor, and America had to come to Remus to get it.
Big ego, and here we end. 45 minutes in the movie.
Remus soon had 3,000 employees working 3 shifts a day and was doing millions of dollars worth of business a year. He bought an elegant mansion in Cincinnati's best neighborhood and filled it with beautiful things.
Crap.
To keep it all going, he paid off an army of local, state, and federal officials. I went on the theory that every man has a price, he said.
Except for one.
I
There's
could
always
afford
a
to pay
principled
it.
man.
But to obtain the thousands of government permits required to withdraw all of the whiskey from his own distilleries, Remus needed direct access to Washington as well. To get it, he went right to the top.
It's not hard when you're making 70 grand a day in cash.
1921, he checked into the Commodore Hotel in Manhattan for the first of
Next to
several
Grand
secret
Central,
meetings
baby.
with Jess Smith, friend, confidant, and fixer for President Harding's Attorney General Harry Doherty. Smith was blunt. Remus could have all the signed federal withdrawal permits he wanted for $2.50 per case. Smith also promised that for another
nice
$50,000, Remus could be protected from punishment. Even if he were arrested and indicted, he would never have to go to jail.
Not bad.
Remus paid him on the spot in $1,000 bills. Over the following months, Remus would meet Smith again and again in Columbus and Indianapolis, Washington and New York, and later claimed to have paid him a total of more than $250,000 in bribes.
You must understand that I was spending much time on the road. Today I could be
He
in
had
New
good
York,
lieutenants.
opening a new drug company, conferring with certain gentlemen.
We have to figure out who those guys were.
On matters pertaining to the conduct of our business without interference from the government. On the train between cities, I was busy studying the new prohibition regulations and devising means to circumvent them as fast as they were issued. You will pardon me for saying that it was a very strenuous life.
All right, now part 2.